Going to be heating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it
win anything. Sam, defend your team because they haven't won.
Oh my God!
Strap yourselves in. It's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Press Forward to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. We're here back another week to talk about some of the stuff that's been going on, LCQ, CHAMPS, all those good things, announcements for next year. It's a very exciting week in the Valorant sphere, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Paul, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling fantastic. Val Tier 2 is safe. We got Champions format for not just next year, but like the next 6 years, right? We got groups announced today. There hasn't been like a ton of news, but the news that has happened in this past week, all of it's massive.
Yeah, some exciting news for sure. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's do it. Run it back. Presented by Temple University, where we talk about the news from the last week and run it back. First story, North American Valorant pros have organized a players association, which is very interesting to me. Getting ahead of it, getting early. A lot of esports, it takes them a long time to figure out that this is actually in everyone's best interest, but it seems the Val pros are a little on top of things, and that's exciting. Obviously, part of this is about figuring out players' place and rights and privileges in the new franchise model, so it makes complete sense for them to organize and negotiate. What do you think, Paul?
I think it's great, especially if you read the article, it says like the Players Association will have like significant quote unquote input on like upcoming formats for major, first party tournaments, right? So it means that they're, the formats are less likely to screw the players over, which I think is always a good thing. You have to maintain high player count. Not just that, but the players at the top have to be happy for your game to succeed if it is a strictly competitive multiplayer game, right? So getting a players union this early, I mean, there are some esports that have been going for years and still don't have a players union. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Lots of them, actually. So I think that this is great that, Val's been out barely 2 years and we already have this.
Yeah, and it's also encouraging that Riot appears to be, interacting with them in good faith, because obviously, speaking about esports where there's not players associations, there have been lots of TOs that or developers, shall we say, named Activision Blizzard, that like to crush unions, among others. There's that. So we do like to see free association. We do like to see organization. The question that's always interesting to me with the players associations, and one of the reasons why they can be very tricky to organize, is like, how far do you go? Right? Sure. Because obviously now that we have our franchise league, like the players who are in partnered teams are going to have different interests and priorities than the players who are in challenger leagues. And so the question is, how deep do you go? Do you do all the players in the franchise partner teams? Do you do all the players in challenger league? Then do you do players beyond that circulating in the tier 3 circuit? Like, how does that work exactly?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it works out, because obviously, in CS, we've seen it, the CSPPA has had its fits and starts in terms of how much actual representation there is for different regions. And then the question is as well, do you expand to different regions or do you keep it regional? Or it's just interesting to see. But it's good. It's good to get ahead of it. It's good to get started with it. And obviously it's well within the player's best interest to have this, to be able to negotiate collectively. And even just compare numbers and talk salaries and things like that. It's a great resource.
And I hope, it does expand to places like, the bigger regions like EMEA, LATAM, Brazil, that sort of thing. I think the more common this becomes, the better it is, not just for Valorant as an esport, but for like every esport, right? So the more players unions, the more consistency and stability we have, just the better for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case. But moving on down, we'll move on down. It's also been an exciting week for announcements. We got a lot of details about challengers for 2023 and beyond. I mean, first of all, let's just talk about the fact that there are going to be 20 challengers leagues as part of the structure around the world. That is huge. I mean, that's a massive expansion. There's a map somewhere in here, but there's like 4 in the Americas, NA, LATAM, Brazil. What's the fourth? What am I missing?
There's a lot.
LATAM South. Okay, LATAM North, LATAM South.
Yeah.
EMEA's obviously got a ton. 7 leagues just in EMEA. And then Asia Pacific, man. Aus League. I mean, they've got a lot going on here. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Philippines, Indonesia. I mean, this is really exciting.
It's robust, right?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about in like this overall announcement that came out yesterday. If you were living under a rock for the last 24 hours, or maybe you just haven't been out in the internet, maybe you were on a boat, for instance, and now you're just coming back. I was on holy moly, this format's crazy. So this is basically the new tier 2 system, right? Like a dedicated secondary tier 2 system. We do have confirmation. Yeah, thank you for scrolling back up. That it is going to feed directly into those international and domestic leagues that we were talking about before, right? With the like soft franchising coming out. So the winner of like the individual challenger leagues gets to go up and play in the international leagues is basically how it works, right? And then once you've won like your regions into like challengers for that year, you are in the international league for 2 years, and then you get dropped back down. There is no relegation. It's not, you're not trading places with one of the franchise teams, right? You are just getting added into that system. And there are plans for more and more to be added throughout the next like 6 years. It ends up being like, I think 42 teams, right?
14 per league.
Well, I mean, total across like international, later down in the article, it talks about it. Once we get to like 2028 or whatever it is, it's like 42 teams in the international league or something like that. So a lot of teams are planned on being added to that system through this challenger promotion path, which is exactly what everybody wanted for tier 2 Valorant, right? We wanted it to be a direct feeder to the international league. We didn't want this like soft lock where only the franchise teams, whoever they ended up being, were the ones who could decide what players got a chance at international. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It is really exciting as well. I think you're going to see a lot of, in North America, right? Obviously, we saw an exodus of orgs, and I think you might see some of them come back in as they see the actual path forward.
According to a report by Bodirk, who friend of the show, he was on just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
There's already 2 teams that like nuked their roster, and the second that this hit, they were already looking for new rosters. And that was like within 3 hours.
Well, to be fair,
within like 3 hours of this
for some of those teams as well, it's going to be about saving the money literally between now and 2023.
Yeah, that too.
But yeah, it's certainly exciting. It gives a whole lot more to the tier 2 scene. There was a lot of concern that there wasn't going to be much if you weren't in one of the partner teams, and clearly there's a genuine path. There's a genuine open circuit. It's not open for everybody, right? But this is pretty damn good while still having a sustainable base for your league to build upon.
Absolutely.
And if they do expand to, I think it was 14 teams for each league, right? Was the number they're trying to hit. I do wonder. I think it's something like 8 to 10 partner teams to begin with for like NA. I do wonder, I guess those 4 slots will all be the move-in teams. So that's 4 or 5 slots. Yeah. That's very exciting. This is super cool to see how this is going to wind up working out. and practical. Yeah, so you've got 10 teams, 11 teams, 12 teams, 13 teams, 14 teams, 14 teams. So we will sustain at 14. Very exciting, dude. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because for the first 2 years of 2023 and 2024, one team gets added, right? And then once you go to 2025, it becomes 2 teams actually ascend from challengers into that international, or at least the domestic leagues, and have a chance to play internationally, right? So that they can retain the count and it doesn't just become static, and they can actually continue growing. So all you have to do is make grand finals in theory of the Ascension tournament. Which is interesting to see that they add more later on. Obviously, it's a 6-year plan, right? 6 years, no one knows what's going to happen in 6 years. There's gonna be additions to this, undoubtedly, and I think there needs to be, because there's still some rough edges, like what happens if a team wins Champions and then gets relegated the next year because their 2 years was up. So there's some funkiness to be sure, but like baseline, this is a great system.
It's very exciting. It is genuinely thrilling. And also, so one other aspect of it that's really interesting that I don't really think any game has quite attempted before, certainly on FBS, is direct promotion into the Challenger League through gameplay in the client. So the idea is that Riot is working on integrating a system where you and 5 buddies or 4 buddies or whatever play just within Valorant. There's like weekly tournaments or something, and through that qualify potentially into Challenger League with your team, and that's going to be the path through. So talk about democratizing the potential climb, right? The path from 0 to hero really is kind of the ideal of esports. The grassroots all the way up is really the dream for a lot of games, and it's very tough to do in a lot of games. So
I do wonder what that's going to look like too, because Riot has tried. It's not quite the same thing, but they've tried something similar with League, right? With the whole like Champions queue going into it, which my understanding, admittedly being like, kind of an arm's length detached from the League scene in depth, my understanding is Champions queue is tumultuous topic, I guess you would say. There's some really good things and some apparently not so good things. I don't know the details of that. It's just what I've heard from my buddies who work intensely in the League scene. But I am excited for the direct integration, right? Because that's just again, like I said earlier, you need to maintain like an active player base, and I think that's a really good way to do that and have it feed directly into the pro scene.
Yeah. It's exciting. We'll see the implementation, but the idea is sound, and it's super cool, and it's something that I think most games should aspire to having, right? Like the ability to go from 0 to hero is the dream of esports. It's like the
right,
the fantasy,
it's awesome.
Almost. So having
and I also wonder how
cool.
they'll do that in relation to the like the age caps we see for, or the age minimums rather that we see for pro scene, right? Because a lot of a lot of the cracked Radiant players on ladder are like 14 years old. They can't play in VCT. So what happens if 5 14-year-olds come through and they roll through whatever Champions queue ends up in for Valorant, and then they can't play because they're too young to do so?
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. I suspect
that
age
it's
limit
stuff like
change.
that has to get ironed out a little bit, but the idea is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be like you have to be X age to qualify, I'm sure.
Yeah,
because it's laws. They're pesky things. Those laws, they get in the way sometimes, but they're there for a reason. They're there for very good reasons frequently too. Moving on here, we have VCT Champions format revealed, but maybe we'll just save that for Champs if that works for Cody. Cody, can we save that for when we talk about Champs?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I'm assuming the fact that we haven't gone, I'm assuming we have a yes.
We will do that.
Cool. So let's talk about LCQ. Holy crap! Holy 100 Thieves straight through. Nade shot popping bottles. Sean Garris flexing. DDK staring longingly into cameras. 100 Thieves take the crown. They're NA's third representative. Oh my God, Paul.
I do want to say, while my bracket was 99% wrong, I got the winner right. So that's all that matters, right? That's all that matters. 100 Thieves ended up going through. That final was kind of crazy, right? I don't think anyone expected it to appear as one-sided as it did. And honestly, it was kind of just Derek and Austin are having an insane tournament, right? I mean, Derek, has long been someone who I've kind of, touted back, even back when he was on Rise. I was like, this guy is like super good. I'd love for him to get on a good team. Holy shit, what happens when he gets on a good team? God damn, the dude was insanely clutch all weekend, and Asuna really turned up for that final against the Guard, right? Just a phenomenal series from 100 Thieves. And while the Guard, I do want to give them a shout out, right? Because I think they played this tournament, while they didn't get through, it was enough for me to not give up on the Guard. You know what I mean? Like coming into this, I was like, was it just like one meta where the Guard played really well at the beginning of the year?
Little faith.
They played really well this tournament, and that's what I wanted to see from them. And even though they don't qualify, I'm still excited for the Guard's future. But 100 Thieves, you can't deny that, especially after that lower bracket run, they really earned it.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine it's disappointing the way the final went for the Guard. Obviously, getting rolled on 3 maps, not really getting your input, your say, not making it a fight. But it was a hell of a tournament up until that point. I mean, upper bracket run, dropping one map in the first round, and then rolling through some tough opponents in C9 and FaZe.
And I think that's why the final being so one-sided was a little bit surprising, right?
Yeah.
Because they, Guard had a little bit of a rough series against Sentinels, right? But C9 and FaZe didn't look like competitors. They Guard made them look like that they shouldn't have even qualified for LCQ in comparison, right? So it was surprising to see Guard not able to find those same sorts of highs for the final, especially since they had that day off prep time to just watch 100 Thieves in the lower bracket versus FaZe Clan.
Yeah,
but I mean, I think the Guard still had a decent tournament overall.
Oh, grand finals. It's all right. It's all
fourth
right.
Best team in NA.
We'll take
it's all
it.
right.
It's okay. It's all right. It does stink that they're not going to make it to champs, but it is very exciting for 100 Thieves to be back here, right? It's been a long time since 100 Thieves was. I mean, First Strike, right? First Strike was the last thing they won. It's been a while. 100 Thieves is a brand that's always been heavy on the investment into the team. Into Valorant. They've been super committed, super eager, signing streamers, all of them play it. Nade shots at Valorant Gremlin. But it's taken them a long time to get back here, but it's very cool to see it work out and to see the investment that they made into infrastructure as well, and completely tearing down the team, getting your GM, getting your coach, getting your analyst, and then completely rebuilding the team. It's cool to see that project work out because this is like go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's cool to see it be like an investment too, right? Because the 100 Thieves roster got completely changed in March, right? If I'm remembering correctly, it would have been like end of stage 1-ish or end of stage 1.
Oh, dude, it was after 2 weeks in stage 1, wasn't it?
Well, they started to blow up their roster a little bit, but then they fully because they had the thing with like Eccles and but then they fully changed their roster when they failed to do anything in stage 1. So I think it was like mid to late March, maybe. So we're like 5 months later, and it's paying off, right? And they've invested in this team, and they've put in the groundwork, and they're like, hey, these are a bunch of young players, and we're going to actually give them the tools to succeed and not just expect instant results. And I think that's really cool to see the culture of 100 Thieves move that direction.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. It's a very intentional project too. And it's a project that didn't have, I mean, apart from Asuna, right, who obviously made his name within Valorant, didn't have any massive names coming into it, right? It was not a clout team. No Hikos, no Ethans, none of that. It was very much a rebuilt team. So it's very cool, and it's awesome to see them as representatives, and I think they're going to do North America proud as well. Also, again, another shout out to Asuna. He went he was like led the team in first kill differential.
By the way,
he good.
Derek had a 31% clutch rate. 31% of the time when Derek was the last one standing, he wins that. 18 times throughout the tournament. 18 times. That is an insane rate. That is insane. There is nobody who played as many rounds as Derek did who even comes close, right? Like the next closest person would be like 23%. Reform technically had a higher clutch rate, but he also was only left in 12 situations, so it's a much smaller sample size, right? Like it is ridiculous what Derek is able to do.
Yeah, dude. It's sick. Another superstar rising, perhaps. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do internationally, because I think for all of them, it's probably their first international stint. Trying to think if Stellar ever did in CS. I don't think so.
Was Asuna at Asuna was at Masters last year, wasn't he? Wasn't he at Masters with 100 Thieves last year when they were in
Right.
Berlin?
Okay. Yep. Okay.
But that's crazy to think about, that Asuna might have the most international experience on this team.
I
right?
think he does. Yeah.
Like that is a wild prospect.
I don't know whether, I mean, Stellar was around in CS for a while. I don't know whether he did like a WESG or anything like that. I don't know that offhand, but no, it's for most of them, it's definitely going to be, I mean, very early experience. Yeah. Dang. Wild. Moving on. Do you think, out of the 8 teams that were in LCQ, or however many teams were in LCQ, do you think that this is the strongest representative that we could have had for North America?
I do think so, right? I think the reason I think that 100 Thieves are going to be the strongest representative out of North America, it was going to be them or the Guard for me, right? Because I think those 2 teams have the best chance of performing consistently at international tournaments and not getting just completely read into by some of the other ones based on their LCQ, right? Like if we had sent Sentinels or if we'd sent FaZe Clan, right? I feel like they would have maybe one banger match and then get absolutely dismantled by the amount of prep that these international teams are going to do against them, right? I don't think that there was going to be a representative as versatile as 100 Thieves to get out of this, and I'm really excited to see guys like Derek and Asuna put up big numbers against international players.
It's yeah, I think it makes sense. I also think it's interesting that both of these teams, right? You look at these teams, they're 2 of the teams with the most developed staff structure.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Obviously 100 Thieves, you know, Sean, DDK, Mikes are bigger names than their players, to be quite frank. And maybe not Mikes, but you know what I mean. Like it's kind of a situation there. But I mean, the Guard as well with MCE and with Cupert, who he's been raving about the impact that Cooper's had on the team.
Cooper brought some really cool comps too, right? To the Guard. Like there were some really interesting compositions that were like, you know, Cupert's that he brought over from teams that he had previously coached and was like, hey, this is a great comp, so we're gonna run it. And MCE was like, yeah, I trust you, and he helped Guard succeed
massively. Matt raves about Cupert even more in private than he just does on Twitter. So like I think it's the development of the structure around teams is so important. We've seen it a lot in EMEA. I think we're seeing it more and more. Obviously, Optic just brought on a couple analysts. I forgot to put that in the run it back, but they did that open tryout for analysts. They're bringing on 2.
Yeah.
I know Trainer's one of them. Name escapes me.
Kruger is the other one.
Kruger. Okay. So that's just exciting to see the expansion of that with such a varied game where you have so many possibilities for things to do. Having that expanded structure, having analysts, having people who can go in and say, all right, what can we do that's weird? I think that's really important. And I think that you're going to see teams continue to expand into that. We'll move on now, though.
Before we move on to EMEA, though, I do want to address, I'm seeing some questions in chat about Sentinels. Sentinels let their fans down with their performance. It's not a hot take, but an aggressive one. Genuine question. Do you think guys like Sen fell off or other teams just did better? Sentinels had a really weird year, in my opinion. Okay. I actually am not upset by Sentinel's performance at LCQ, considering how things were going into how things were during stage 2, right? They had guys being sick. They had weird roster stuff, right? I think Sentinels actually showed me that they can get back on track. The additions of Zelsis and, I mean, Shroud was kind of just like a clout pick, but I don't think Shroud did terribly. Right? Definitely got more bullied than everybody else on that team because he doesn't have as much recent competitive experience, but that was kind of always going to happen. I think the mentality of Sentinels is actually in a positive trajectory. Now, whether or not they'll be able to maintain that between now and like next, I don't know, February when VCT starts up again, right? In these 6 months, and where changes might come into the team between now and then, I have no idea. But I actually think this was a better performance from Sentinels than I expected at this tournament, right? They absolutely clapped Shopify Rebellion in the lower bracket. That was not a close game. And they actually put up really solid performances against the grand finalists, right? Yeah. They took a map off Guard, and the other 2 maps were insane overtimes. And then that 100 Thieves game was also relatively close, if I remember correctly. The
Yeah,
first
took a
map
map
was
off.
insanely close. And then even the third map, which they ended up losing, went full regulation, right? So I actually don't think it was a terrible performance from Sentinels. I think there is reason to believe that Sentinels were actually the third best team in this tournament. It's just third best is not what their fan base expects of them based off that early success Sentinels had in Valorant.
I think to build on it as well, talking about like the trajectory of teams, it's tough to maintain dominance once you're on top. I think, you see this across sports, esports, everything, any form of competition, right? It's a lot easier mentally to focus on having a goal to achieve. And then once you've had that goal to achieve, you become the goal for other people, right? You become the target on other people's back. And I think Sentinels maybe fell into this trap a little bit where, you're on top. So maybe you don't work quite as hard. Maybe you're not quite as hungry. Maybe some things fade off. Maybe other priorities happen. And they kind of got into that rut, right? And I think the new blood, I think bringing Zelsis in is great for them. I think Zelsis showed up really nicely throughout this tournament.
Yeah.
That
I think
one makes
Zelsis was a
complete
great
sense
addition.
to me.
He's good for their brand too, right? Like he fits the vibe.
Yeah. Jordan's a lunatic. He'll do well there in terms of the brand. But I think the other question is what's going on with Sick? Is Sick coming back into the roster? Obviously, we know Sick had a huge ceiling in terms of what he was able to accomplish with it. We don't really know what's going on with Sick. Obviously, none of our business in that regard, but that's the big consideration for Sentinels. Do you let this team run once Sick is back instead of Shroud? Do you attempt to find a replacement for him to continue injecting that new life and new blood in?
Well, and the real question is it's Sick and Zelsis who are sharing roles, right?
True.
So do you like let Shroud go back to being a streamer and try Sick on a new role where he plays controller now, or do
you try and get a new contract to Shroud to say, please Shroud, deign to play with us?
Please, yeah. I mean that too as well, right?
Financially,
I think Sentinels have a lot of questions coming into the future, but I am less doom and gloom about their like prospects as an organization than I was 2 months ago.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that they recognize now
less
that
than this whole year
change is needed. You gotta fight. They're not the top team that they were, and it's about being hungry to get back there. So we'll see what that winds up looking like. But that is, I think, not a bad place to be in for Sentinels. The question is just what are the next moves? What's the next focus for the team? So yeah, I'm not doom and gloom on it either. After Champions, is there anything for the rest of the year? Seeing that for Balda, there are third-party tournaments. Basically,
we don't know anything, but yes,
the idea is it's going to be like what First Strike was, I think, to a degree, or the Ignition series rather, more than First Strike. But we don't really know what that's going to look like. There's Red Bull homegrounds announced; those are happening. That's our first real taste of it. But it's going to be up to third-party TOs. Things like obviously the Nerd Street Winter Champs will probably be happening. Don't know if we have an announcement.
Knights will probably have something, right?
But yeah, it'll be about the third parties coming in. We'll see what that winds up looking like. This is the first time we've had that big chunky off season, so we'll have to see how it plays out to see what it actually does look like. Talk about EMEA. Let's talk about EU. EMEA, last chance a qualifier. Liquid just always need to be in the international events.
They always find their way somehow, dude. Whether it's an insane performance in the very last bit, or if it's not even technically qualifying and then getting seeded in because another team can't make it. Liquid always finds their way to these internationals, dude. What a crazy last series though from Scream, right? Liquid didn't win. I'll be honest. Liquid didn't win that game. Scream won that game.
Mm-hmm.
Scream won that. Scream showed up on the Phoenix and made it look like viable. That Scream had just a disgusting performance in that best of 5. He went 91 and 60 over 4 maps. That's just rude.
It is crazy to me that he's playing Phoenix.
Wow.
Do you think we're going to see more Phoenix now that Scream's popularizing?
He's not the only one either, right? There are actually a couple teams internationally that have attempted the Phoenix on Ascent most specifically. I've seen it a couple times on Haven too. I don't think Phoenix is unplayable. I've talked to a few players about this. I think he is usable, but you have to have a very specific idea on what you want to do, and he's still very exploitable.
Okay.
I think Scream is able to make Phoenix work because
he's the edge shot
holy
machine.
Shit, he's Scream. Yeah, exactly.
He is the edge shot machine. He's been the edge
Yeah.
shot machine. He's just keeping it going.
True.
Yeah, man. I mean, Scream went ham. Yumpy also went ham.
Yumpy did also have a really good game. I will say that last
crazy.
map of Breeze,
Mhm.
I actually think Yumpy, despite the fact that Yumpy didn't technically put up as good of numbers as Scream, I actually think that Yumpy had more impact kills. Just holding down, what was it? Which site is the Pyramids one? A. Took me a second. Holding down the A site with the operator on Chamber. Yumpy had like multiple rounds where he just completely shut out Mech. He'd just get like 3 kills instantly with the op, perfectly peeling around every corner, and it was done. And it was even like toggling on 2 different angles. Like he'd be watching caves and get a pick, and then look at door and get a pick, and then look back to caves and get a pick. Yumpy was insane.
That's dope. Love to see it. Really do love to see it. Very interested to see how Liquid does internationally. Do we think that this is, I mean, the same question I asked about NA, do we think this is the strongest representative possible out of this last chance qualifier? Or do we think like a mech would have been better?
If Scream keeps that performance, this is the strongest possible out of this qualifier. The question is, can Scream and Yumpy and actually the entire team, realistically speaking, can they keep that high level of performance? Because if they show up and Scream doesn't have those same sort of burners, I don't have high hopes for Liquid, right? I think Mech maybe would have been a little bit more consistent. Like what I was kind of talking about with 100 Thieves, so I think they were the most consistent team to send. I think Mech might have been a little bit more of a consistent team to send. But I think Liquid showed that their peaks are straight up higher. Liquid playing at their best, if everybody's online, I think that they are a serious contender.
I think also, I mean, with Mech, obviously there's that element of their orgless right now. They're trying to find a new organization, and that always distracts just a little bit. Even if you're like, we're not going to negotiate until after it, you're still thinking about it. You're still thinking about it. There's still conversations. There's still that extra pressure in your mind where you're like, if we win this match, we'll get a better org. If we win this, we'll get a better contract. If we win this, we have, so I think in a weird way, like maybe that's. Could you
imagine being like the only unsigned team at Champions?
You probably wouldn't be for long, but
exactly.
It's just an interesting thing to think about. But very exciting to see Liquid come in and see what they're going to be able to do in terms of the playing field. So let's talk about Champions, because we've got all of our teams. We got our 16 teams here, 4 groups. Quite the spicy array here. The table is set. We got our qualified teams. My goodness.
Yeah.
How are we feeling?
It's quite a lot, right? My oh my. It is quite a lot here. I can't but you asked me, do I think, Liquid and 100 Thieves are the best teams that could have showed up, right? I think across the board, these are all the teams that I wanted here. I can't think of a team that missed out other than maybe Mech, right? And other than maybe the Guard, but that's just because I know EMEA and NA better. This is an absolute fire lineup of teams.
I think that NA, it's going to be the question of XF versus the Guard, because they basically did the same thing. XF just did it in the second Masters instead of the second Masters instead of the first Masters, so they got the spot. So that is a question. But we'll see. Either way, it would have just been a question of how a young team does in their second international stint. So I think narratively, it's very similar. And the XAT obviously have a ton to prove in terms of this. I think the EMEA reps are going to be litty. Fnatic and FPX, Liquid, whatever Liquid does, Fnatic FPX is such a powerful twosome to be coming out of EMEA. That's just spicy. And then with Paper Rex, what they did last go around.
Paper Rex, dude, you can't not be excited for Paper Rex at this point, right? They just play insane. They play insane Valorant, and it works an absurd amount of the time, considering how insane Valorant they play.
Yeah, dude. And dude, I mean, let's talk about Edward,
fun,
because that is such a hilarious team name.
He's gaming, dude. Yes,
dude, Edward
the
is
EDG
gaming.
Representative.
China rolling in strong, dude.
Absolutely. And I mean, this team has just been dominating China as long as Valorant has been playable there, right? It's still not technically released in China, but EDG has just looked so good. They slapped the East Asia qualifier too. It was not close. There was like 1 or 2 maps, I think, that went overtime, one of which went to like 21-19. But EDG did not drop a single map the entire time
I
that
would
they were
like-
going through that bracket.
I
It's-
just
it's
one
wild.
request. Please refer
Mhm.
to them as either Ed or Edward. EDG is much less fun to say. Just say Edward.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
You got to take advantage when you have a team name like this.
Yeah. I mean, while we're talking about Edward, right? Let's just
Edward,
let's just pull up the groups then, right? Because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
talking about Paper X, we're
Holy
talking about
shit.
Edward Gaming.
We got the
That's
groups.
the first match.
Dude.
That's wild. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine more chaotic Valorant than to start off Champions than Paper X, the Joyous Whimsy team versus Edward. I'm just going to swing on everybody because I never lost a gunfight in my life, or at least I don't think I have gaming.
Yeah. It's going to be spicy, dude.
That is a stupidly fun match to start Champions off with, dude. I cannot wait.
I'm really all right. So here's the matchup in this group A that I would be really excited for.
Mhm.
Is I'm very curious to see what happens if we wind up getting a Team Liquid Edward Gaming matchup.
Sure.
Because traditionally, so the Edward Gaming Chinese FPS style of I'm a swing and click your head. Sometimes it takes teams off guard as more structured teams, but other times it's just like hitting a brick wall. Where it's like, I could just run over everyone else. You know, you think you're in your pickup truck, you're just knocking cars off the road, and then you hit a monster truck coming the other way, and it's like,
Yep.
you can't run that over. So I am very curious to see how Edward's gonna do, faced with some stiffer competition, and obviously, people know what's coming. They got some time to prep, they got some time to watch it and prep for that style. But there's always a difference between thinking about theoretically what that style is gonna be like and feeling it in the server.
And I don't want to actually undersell Edward, right? Because, while a lot of it is they just run at you because China teams like to play, like, no matter what the game is, right?
Yep.
China just loves to play, like, hyper aggro, super quick pace. We're just going to fight and do what we want kind of video games, right? They also have, like, really intelligent compositions and really strong strategies. I think their Fracture is arguably going to be one of the best in the world. I want to see how it matches up against other teams that have really good fractures, but they're like, at least on what they showed in East Asia qualifier, I don't think they gave more than 3 or 4 rounds on Fracture every time they played it. It was insane what they were able to do. They play like a really cool double duelist Neon and Raze comp, which I think is super strong for taking space, especially on the attacking side, and it's great for retakes too. I'm really excited for Edward Gaming.
All right. I'm excited for Edward too. Let's talk about other groups. I mean, in this group, obviously we haven't touched on Leviathan really, but
I think they're definitely the underdog of the group. Right?
Yeah. We'll save our Preds for next week because we do have another week, another
Absolutely,
show
we
before
do.
the actual event happens. But Group A, we're just doing our initial reactions right now. So let's talk about Group B here. Optic, the boys, Boom,
What a group.
Zeta Division, and then Loud. How are we feeling about this group?
What a group, dude. Looking at all of these groups, you cannot convince me that, like, the video that they put out earlier today that went over like Champions format was like, oh, teams are randomly seeded into their groups, right?
Yeah.
I'm calling BS. There's no way Optic and Loud ended up in the same group again, dude. Randomly. No, I do not buy your shit for a second, Riot. That is absolutely in the script. What a ridiculous, that's insane. And Zeta Division too, right? Really cool storyline there as well, because Zeta Division Loud, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a rematch from Masters, right? That was our runner-up game, our lower bracket final. I'm pretty sure it was Zeta. It was either Zeta or Paper X versus Loud. I'm pretty sure it was Zeta. So like, what a group of storylines for Group B, right? A bunch, like at least three teams who performed really well at Masters 1 and at Masters 2 didn't quite get this. I mean, Zeta didn't even get there, right? So they all have like a lot to prove, like early on in Champions.
Yeah, most certainly. That group, to my eyes, that group feels like the group of death. Maybe Group D.
It's either them or D.
Yeah.
It depends on how Zeta Division performs, right? If Zeta Division is like Masters 1 sort of proficiency, right? I think that's more of a group of death than Group D potentially.
Yeah. Let's talk about C first. C, FPX Crew, X at Xerxia. The X's, apparently, double X over here. How are we feeling about that?
Right?
Oh, yeah, with FPX. You're right. Triple X. Triple X. This is the adult division.
this should be the most straightforward group. Should be, I say. Xersta has always taken the first game off of NA, though. Like, they always get seeded against NA in like first time in groups, and they always win it. That has been 100%, even when they were X10, right? That they were doing that to Optic, right? So XSET definitely need to be on form. There is room for XSET to kind of fumble out of this group, but it should, on paper, be the most straightforward.
Yeah, I think so. So much of it is about XSET and how much they've been able to learn and improve since the last international stint. But we will see. And then Group D. Oh my God, dude.
This group's
Fnatic 100 Thieves is our first round matchup. Is spicy.
Again, you cannot convince me that these things are not written into the script.
Yeah,
there's just no way, right? I cannot think of a more clout NA versus EU match to start off, other than maybe Optic FPX. But if Optic FPX had happened in first round groups, I think everybody would have gone insane. So this is just insane. And I think it's a really interesting litmus test too for 100 Thieves. I think they're expected to lose this match, right? Pretty decently at that. At least if Fnatic actually performed. But there were also a lot of questions for Fnatic with how they ended up being at Masters 2, right? They were kind of the favorites going into Masters 2. And while they still had like a pretty decent run, they also made some like egregious mistakes that cost them maps, that cost them games. So I think this is an interesting litmus test for both these teams.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. And I mean, again, you talk about Fnatic, who've been at every international dang event, who have as much experience in international VAL as anyone does. And then you have 100 Thieves, where, as we said before, I think just Austin has played international, and there's just very, very little to work with in terms of XP. It's always different when you're on a stage. It's always different when you're in front of a crowd, when you're in person, when you just traveled to Istanbul. Like, it is going to be a challenge for these guys to overcome it, to level up in terms of that experience very quickly. And that first matchup might just be like a wake up call of getting absolutely smacked. I think that's going to be a really tough test for 100 Thieves. I'm excited to see how they respond to it. I'm
interested to see how DRX performs in this group too, right? I think, I have been a big proponent that, for a couple of tournaments now, that as much as I wanted to like DRX, as much as I wanted to believe that Korean Valorant would be good, they've kind of just been getting their, clocks cleaned every time they come in. Like, they do somewhat decently every time, and they never perform any better, right? And the rest of Valorant is kind of moving on and performing better and better and better, and DRX just haven't quite shown that same sort of capability to adapt and put themselves back in the conversation. I think if DRX can make it out of this group, which is very possible, there's room for me to at least hope more in DRX going into the future.
It's a dangerous thing to trust to hope.
I remember during Masters 2, DRX had like one really good map against, I think it was Optic or something, and Sam messaged me and was like, "Are you believing in DRX now?" And I was like, "No." And then they didn't win another map for the rest of Masters. And I was like, this is why. Because the second you start to believe in DRX is the second they flame out.
I will also say one request for Riot, my one request for Champions: if 2 NA teams make it out of groups, which they will, 3 will hopefully make it out of groups. Please no NA versus NA first round matchup in the playoffs. Please, God, please stop.
I will riot.
If it happens, you'll riot.
I didn't mean to do that.
Riot against Riot.
I like that though. Good catch.
But no,
Good
please,
catch.
God, no. Please.
No EMEA either. It happened to them too, right? And that's
dude.
That is something I'm concerned about too, because they said in the video that they put out today on how the format works is that the winners are randomly seeded into the tournament bracket, into the playoff bracket. I'm assuming, or randomly sorted, which I'm assuming it'll still be like winners play losers, right?
Yes,
because that's what they've always done. I think it would be wild if they didn't do that. They didn't clarify that in the video.
Oh yeah, but of course you can't see.
But I assume it'll be winners of groups play losers of groups, right?
Yes.
Or at least second place of groups, I should say. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but I think there's a decent chance.
Just let Optic
Especially
play
since I don't think it's
whoever
out
from
of the
Group
realm
A.
of possibility that all 3 NA teams could be second in their group. Optic is really the only team I think has a strong chance of making first in their group, right?
Yep.
Although if all 3 of them get second, then they won't fight each
Then
other.
they can't match.
At
Then
the
they
very least.
cannot match. It'll be fine. Just like Group A and Group B seed against each other. That's fine. At least Optic can have a non-NA first round matchup. That's what I want.
Bro, could
This
you
is my
imagine
dream.
Optic versus like EDG or something? That would be crazy. Anyways.
Edward. I'm excited. I'm going to be cheering for Edward just because Edward. How can you not? How can you not?
They're so fun to watch too. I have no idea what I'm gonna do in that Paper X versus like Edward game because I just want everybody to have a good time.
Just want everyone to have a good time. Speaking of having a good time. Oh no,
what's
go
the one
ahead.
player's name. His ID's super weird. It's like ZMJKK, but like he's called Kang Kang, I think. His story is so wholesome too because it's like his like name and how he goes is Kang Kang, but like the first part of his like player ID is his brother's player ID who like got him into gaming, and it's super wholesome.
That's
dude.
wholesome.
Like it's just hard not to root for Edward.
That is definitely wholesome. But speaking of things that are wholesome, the previous transition was better. Anyway,
I flubbed your transition.
I'm going to transition us now that Paul's completely screwed up my segue, crashed my segue off a goddamn cliff.
Sucks.
It's time to talk about the Nerd Street Summer Champs because they're happening this weekend in sunny Philadelphia. We've got the best of NA Valorant coming on through. The LCQ starts tomorrow. We've got our LCQ teams, 12 teams competing for a few slots. This is dang exciting. Some of the teams we got, such story names as Why Do We Suck? iCup.
Relatable, dude.
Roy's Kitten Shelter. Rocket Jeff Esports. No, there are genuinely
I love
familiar
pug
names.
teams.
Obviously, Ghost is the only actual team in this stage of it. We've got more actual teams in the event proper.
Well, at least the biggest
team.
actual team, right?
Is
Wolfwood,
realism esports a real thing?
Well, I don't know about real. Wolfwood technically is.
Okay.
They're like a small like tier 3 team, but I know Wolfwood just because there's like some collegiate players I really like on that team.
Gotcha.
Ghost Gaming is the team you expect to do really well here, right?
Yeah.
It would be insane if Ghost Gaming didn't just come in and clean house.
Ghost should make it through. It'll be a bit of a shock for them if they don't. But yes,
What is
this
the
is
top?
LCQ.
How many teams make it from LCQ? Is it just like top 1? Do we know?
Yeah, we do know, but I should go check that. Hold on, let me check the format. Why are you putting me on the spot?
Asking
Check it
Mike questions
yourself.
he's not ready for.
Yeah, I mean, you could have looked this up yourself. Don't put this on me. This is on us.
I checked VLR. What else
This is
would
on
you
us
ask me?
collectively. Liquipedia or the Battlefy. We have
that would make
options
far too
here.
much sense. Apparently, a lot of teams. Actually, if I'm looking at VLR,
The top
correctly.
8. So the top 8. It's half.
So like,
Half of these teams should
more
make it
than
through.
half these teams.
Oh
Which is
yeah,
cool.
wait, that's actually wild because there's only 12 teams. So yeah, okay, all right. So most teams
few.
make it through the LCQ. It's just a
Shout
bit
out,
of
then.
a separation of the wheat from the chaff here is what we're doing. But for players that you might be familiar with who are on pug teams, Roy's Kitten Shelter has Mr. Roy Stronglegs Ahad himself. Did I get his last name right? Oh my god, if I did,
I believe in you.
in a minute since I've said his name. Any context? Oh, we'll see. Yes, I did. All right, I'm proud of
Nice.
myself for that one. But
Big
no,
W.
genuinely, there's some very exciting teams. Mac, the coach of Shopify Rebellion, is apparently playing as part of Rocket Jeff Esports. I don't know the last
cool.
time Mac actually competed as a player, but that's fun. That's exciting. Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. If you're in the Philadelphia area, come on out.
Definitely.
Come hang out, meet some of your idols in Valorant. It's always an exciting time. LAN is fun, man. LAN is so much fun. I can't wait for that to be happening. It's just it's gonna be a really cool time. And then obviously, beyond that, we've also got the actual main event. We got the Summer Champs. These are the teams that are already qualified in Oxygen Academy, rolling in strong. Soar Gaming, rolling in strong. Knights Academy, TLC, TSM Academy, Cosmic Divide, Zero Marksman, Black, Virtuoso. There's a lot of squads here, man. There's a lot of squads, Paul. Who are you excited for?
Well, I mean, you mentioned most of them, right? I mean, obviously, Lenny Time is going to be a fun addition that everybody is keeping an eye out for at this point, just based on name. And you got, oh my God, I'm spacing.
Who are you asking about?
The guy on Lenny,
The
popular guy,
Lenny of Lenny Time Gaming.
No, oh my God, I'm gonna be very upset that I can't remember who I'm trying to talk about. Anyways, but Native Black is also a very interesting team.
You're talking about Mocking?
Yeah, Mocking. Jesus, I can't believe I can't remember Mocking.
There we go. Come on, man.
Native Black is also interesting, right? They got like Cutler and Drone on that team. Nearest Airport is like a lot of the old NY Fury guys, like Anderson, Calypso, Governor's on that team too. Like there's just a lot of talent going through all of this, so it's going to be a super interesting tournament.
Yeah, dude. It's gonna be
City
popping.
Boys. City Boys has a lot of the older crew guys, right? You got like Neon on that team. You got Zachary on that. Actually, that might just be a crew. Looking at their roster, I think that is straight up just a crew. City Boys. So shout out to them staying together even after they got dropped from a crew, because a crew were one of the orgs that panicked when they didn't get partnership, right? It's gonna be a super dope tournament.
It is going to be a super dope tournament. So yeah, if you're in the area, come on out. It's all weekend. Obviously LCQs tomorrow, and then the next 3 days are the actual tournament proper. It's at the Block
in the area instead of in the desert.
It's at the Block in downtown Philadelphia. So come on through. It's a great spot. It's a great venue. It's a super cool tournament. And LCQ going to be pretty spicy to see who makes it through in the tournament itself. It's time for Summer Champs. We've been building towards this for months. Now it's time to crown a champion. It's time to anoint a king of the Nerd Street circuit, and they'll hold that until the winter, till Winter Champs at the very least. So let's crown a king. Let's anoint a team champion. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's gonna be a massacre. It's gonna be a real battle all the way through, and I'm very excited to see who's going to be left standing at the end. Paul, I think that's gonna wrap up our show for the week. You got any final?
Are we finishing
thoughts to talk
early?
About? I know, right? It's such a strange concept. We never do this half-hour show that's turned into an hour show. You got any final thoughts before we send the folks on their way?
I mean, there's just so much good Valorant coming up, right? Nerd Street Summer Champs is going to keep you occupied until we have Champions in 2 weeks. I'm super excited. Valorant is only on the up and up.
Valorant is only on the up and up. Indeed, next year looking really exciting as well. That roadmap set out. It's going to be exciting to see how the Tier 2 scene develops now that there is a prize at the end of the road for organizations to actually build towards. But it's been another wonderful episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Press Forward to Defuse live every week at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. We'll see you for the next one. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.